Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today from EA, we received a 27-minute uncut gameplay video that showed nothing but gameplay throughout the entire thing. Now, over the course of it, we had some questions from myself and fellow content creator Henrique that we asked Ben Ross and Tyson, gameplay developers for NHL 22, about some of the more specific mechanics inside of the new game. So while Ben is great at answering community questions, he does tend to talk quite a bit. So I thought that I would break it all down and simplify some of the things that we talked about in the gameplay video. I also want to mention, guys, I think you should go watch the entire thing. There is a lot of great content in there. We ask a ton of questions, but for this video, I kind of want to make it a recap and just talk about my thoughts on it and more in depth, as well as just break it down and make it a little more simple for everyone. All right, guys, if you like the video, make sure to give it a like. It really helps me out with the YouTube algorithm, and subscribe for the most up-to-date NHL 22 content. All right, let's get into the video.
Jump right into this, and I actually want to go ahead and ask the first question. For those who played the game early through the technical test, passing seemed to be a hot topic. People either love it or they struggle with it. What changed with passing this year, and what was the thinking behind that decision?
Alright, so if you played the closed technical test, you noticed that passing was clearly the biggest difference in terms of gameplay in NHL 22. Clappy kicks things off in this video by asking, was that intended? What changes have they made? And is it working as intended from the technical test? So Ben goes on to state that, yes, passing was a big focus of gameplay in NHL 22. Too often throughout the last few years, and really I guess the better portion of the last 10, we just basically hit the pass button and it automatically locked on and you kind of just forgot about it. Didn't matter how hard it was, the situation, or the actual way that it was being done, whether it was behind the back, if you were curling away. In NHL 22, they put a big focus point on making sure that if you're going to pass, it needs to be accurate, you need to be aiming it correctly, and the situation that you are passing from is smooth. From my personal experience from playing NHL 22 and the alpha and the beta so far, I've really enjoyed the new skill gap that this has created. Again, you don't realize how easy passing has been until you get into NHL 22, and you can't just blindly fire passes behind your back and expect your player to receive them in stride. You need to make sure that you're set and that your pass is well aimed and well timed for your player to receive it in stride. And I think this is a great addition to the game and something that is obviously going to take a lot of time for people to get used to.
You obviously can't pass a pass as hard on your backhand as you can your forehand. It's tougher to make passes against your momentum. These are all things that we've had in our shot model before. So when we looked specifically at the call out for forced cross crease passes, we did want to make sure that those were more earned. So it comes down to player twitch skill and also all the pieces that, again, you can equate to what it means to pass in the real world. So a strong pass with your momentum on your forehand is obviously going to be far better than one against your momentum on your backhand behind you.
All right, guys, before I get into my first question, I want to thank you guys for having me for this talk. I just want to touch on the passing from the closed technical test that people either, loved it or struggled with it, specifically on receptions of the pass. So when players were receiving it, that seemed to be kind of universally maybe disliked. It just seemed like they weren't handling the puck cleanly. Do you agree with that? And is it something that you're going to focus on maybe adjusting before launch, or do you think it's working as intended? So when it came to puck reception specifically in the closed technical test, that was where there was a bit of an issue. I found that you really couldn't handle the puck cleanly, even if the pass was received or sent correctly. It was a very big, tough balance to actually get the puck and settle it down. Now, Ben goes on to state that EA really wants to reward people that can pass the puck well. They want to reward the players that are able to do that effectively, but they did take the feedback into account and the fact that it just seemed like you were bumbling the puck far too often. So I anticipate something that'll be a little bit more dialed back when it comes to receiving the pass in the launch of the game, but we'll have to wait and find out on that. Defensive pass intercepts in NHL 21 seem to be like non-existent. What was the cause of that, and how has that changed in 22? Okay, so one of the biggest criticisms of NHL 21 was that forced pass meta, which basically just had everyone sending passes through usually the center of the ice for a one-timer through 4 or 5 different players, and it would always go through no matter what. There was actually a reason for that, and Ben goes on to explain what that is. In NHL 21, they actually turned off the old puck interception model that had players making animations to intercept passes. So what I mean by that is if you had your player in the lane of a pass. Even if your stick was not directly in the path of the puck, your player would automatically move his stick, move his skate, something to get in the way to intercept that pass. Now, EA wanted to increase the skill gap of playing defense, and they did, in all honesty, because it made it so you had to have your stick in the perfect lane, or you had to crouch down to do a pass block, those kinds of things. But obviously, the community as a whole did not really enjoy that new change to the game. So in NHL 22, they've turned back on the puck interception model, and that is why, if you played the closed technical test, you noticed probably the biggest impact to the game so far, other than passing, was that intercepts were so much more prevalent. And I think that's going to lead to a lot more of an enjoyable gameplay experience. It's going to go back to what it was before. That means there won't be so many players, getting just blind passes sent through the middle that lead to a goal, and obviously that was an extremely frustrating experience when you were playing the game.
We actually had turned off our old pass disruption model in the online space. So for players who played offline, you would have continued to see basically what were like these poke checks where players could defend passing lanes automatically, just the same as they would play an automatic pass reception or pickup. They would poke pucks. But in the online space, because we were asked to generate a bigger skill gap, and especially when players would perform these actions when they didn't expect them, maybe it would disrupt their skating and that kind of thing, we turned them off.
This question is always a big one though. Speed, of course, always a big factor in the game. It's always a major topic. So there is instances in which a much faster player cannot get space against a much slower one. What could cause that?
So my man Henrik asks, obviously one of the bigger issues with hockey in general is that the speed stat seems to just get thrown out the window in some instances when playing the game. Ben goes on to explain why that actually occurs. So offline, the game is tuned to be a little bit more slower, a little bit more simulation based. So the acceleration stat and the tuner on it is set much lower. But obviously, when you play online, you don't want to have that strict sim style of play, or at least the majority of the player base doesn't want to have a slower experience online. So they tune acceleration to be a little bit higher. That's why you don't notice it as much when you have a big discrepancy in the acceleration stat. Now, one of the biggest causes for slower players being able to keep up with the faster ones, Ben goes on to state that if you deke early on in your stride, so let's say you collect the puck inside your zone and then you break it out down the boards, if at any point you make a deke, or if you hold the puck left and right, anything like that, it will impede you quite a bit, and that will impact your speed when actually trying to get through the ice against a defender. So obviously when you're defending, you don't have as much to take into account for. You're able to just beeline straight back. You don't have to go left and right nearly as much when you're defending, and you don't have the puck. So deking is completely out of the question. You don't have the access to it. So the one thing that he does state is make sure that you're not making moves with the puck. And when you're defending a puck carrier that has slower speed, make sure that you turn around. In my opinion, he doesn't go on to state this specifically, but if you stay back skating, you will skate slower than when you are skating forward. That's just common sense, obviously. So make sure that if you are defending someone who is slower, no matter what, if you have a fast player, turn them around and play them like that, and you will notice it a lot less. Now, obviously, it's not a perfect world, but it explains why in some instances, if you go back and watch when a slower player beats you, or when you have a faster player with the puck and you can't get by a slower player, this would explain why. Now, they go on to discuss lots of things in terms of frostbite and how that impacts gameplay, but one of the biggest things that they've added into the game is stick in physics. And if you don't know what that is, stick in physics is the ability now to separate the stick from the player inside of the game. It is two completely separate layers. In all prior NHLs, the stick and the player were all one, which led to a lot of issues like the stick being put through the boards or through the net or another player. And that is what caused that. In NHL 22, that no longer happens. So if your stick hits something, it will react natively, meaning that if it hits someone's leg, it will bounce off, or the net, it'll bounce off. But one of the big issues that the stick and player being one layer actually caused was, in some cases, you would just lose the puck, or you wouldn't be able to grab it quickly, even though it seemed like you were in position for it. The reason for it, and Ben goes on to explain, is that when a stick went through the boards, that obviously was not meant to happen, which means they had to code in a little bit of a penalty or a slight freeze so that the player couldn't react, because he shouldn't have been in that position anyways. That was a issue with the game, with the stick being through the boards or the net, things like that. That shouldn't have ever happened. So they had to put in a little bit of a penalty when that actually happened, because your player wasn't actually in his proper position. In NHL 22, that is no longer going to be the case, and if you are in position, if your stick is in the right spot, you will receive the puck, or again, bounce off if you're defending it well, and I think that's a great change for NHL 22. So guys, those were the biggest takeaways that I had from the NHL 22 uncut gameplay video that they released. I urge you guys to go watch the entire thing. There's a lot of great content in its entirety, and I'll put the link for it down below. If you guys enjoyed the video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel for the most up-to-date NHL 22 content. I'll see you next time. Have a good one.